Welcome to Living the Spiral. This is a place to slow down, take a breath, and listen to the rhythms moving through your life. Here we explore astrology, human design, the I Ching, and elemental ancestral wheels of the year from cultures around the world. These are old maps and living languages that help us sense where we are in time, what is asking to unfold, and how we belong to something far larger than any single moment. In each episode, we trace patterns in the sky and in the body. We weave myth with lived experience, intuition with practice, and the personal with the collective. Living the Spiral is about learning how to move with change instead of pushing against it. About meeting transitions with curiosity, integrating polarities, and remembering that every season carries its own powerful wisdom. When you begin to listen to the cycles, life starts to feel more connected, more meaningful, and more alive. I'm your host, Allison Dale, and this is Living the Spiral podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Living the Spiral podcast. It's been a minute. I haven't come on here in a bit since the Leo season introduction where I talked about the eclipse portal that would be happening and probably mentioned my Uranus opposition because it's just been a big midlife transit that's been on my mind. But I hope everybody's had a good Leo season so far. I wanted to pop on here today and talk about what happened during this eclipse on my own chart because tracking it personally is really teaching me something about the collective shift as well. I had been really curious about how this Leo total solar eclipse on the South Node would show up for me since my Uranus for a while now, since it was also the date of my Uranus opposition, which is a midlife transit we all go through around age 42. Uranus takes 84 years to orbit the sun, and so at halfway through that, Uranus is halfway across the sky from where it is in your birth chart. So if you're listening and you're over 42, think back to your 42nd year. And if you're less than 42, know that you have this coming. It is a midlife transit that is all about bringing in awareness through liberation, through sometimes disruption and sudden shock, about how you've been living the first half of your life, essentially, and really bringing some deep lessons into the picture through sometimes a disruptive or liberatory electric mechanism. I knew this was on August 12th, and then I did some other readings and looked ahead in the horoscopes and saw that the Leo eclipse was also happening that day on my Venus, between my Venus and Mars. And it was also during this time of this six-pointed star in the sky where all of the planets are making a grand sextile to each other at around 3 to 5 degrees of these air and fire signs. And it was just, there seemed like a lot going on. And then, of course, there was rumors about losing gravity on that day, which I just loved to hear. It was kind of like just some interesting conspiracy fodder that had some pretty cool graphics of people floating up into the sky and a lot of fear-mongering. There was also the Perseid meteor showers that are peaking this week that are still happening. The Perseids are a beautiful, beautiful meteor shower every year, but this year, because it's a new moon eclipse, the skies are extra dark and these showers are beautiful. I went out last night into my backyard and I had several beautiful, huge streaker sightings. So highly recommend if you're in an area where you can see the sky and it's not too smoky or cloudy to go outside tonight and check out the meteor shower. There's also this planetary lineup in the sky yesterday where you could see 6 planets, 4 with the naked eye and then 2 with telescopes, making a line across the eastern horizon before sunrise. So much celestial activity happening that it was spilling out from the edges and it wasn't confined to just the astrological community. But I've been probably thinking about this eclipse and this day, August 12th, 2026, since last year. Last year on my birthday, there was a lunar eclipse that was in Pisces. It was opposite my sun, total lunar eclipse, and it was on the Pisces-Virgo axis. So the axis of my sun and earth in human design. And then this year, a year later, I knew that a solar eclipse was landing near my late natal Venus, between my Venus and Mars. And so I was like, okay, I'm getting hit by these eclipses right on my personal planet. And it's felt like a portal for sure. Like gate the gates where these showed up in my birthday eclipse last year was my birthday gate is gate 64, the gate of confusion and imagination. And across the sky is gate 63 in Pisces, which is the gate of doubt and curiosity. And so that was the axis that was the doubt gate was being eclipsed by the shadow of the earth on the moon. And then this year, the gate that was being eclipsed, where the sun and moon met up in Leo, was gate 4, the gate of formalization, which is all about our minds reaching for an answer. And both of those have been eclipsed within the course of a little less than a year, right on my Venus and my Sun Earth axis. And so there's been a lot that's come through. And for me, what cleared last year with my over the course of the year, eclipses can take 6 months or more to really show their full effects, the cycle of the moon, but they're not always apparent on the day of, but they can definitely lead to a reckoning. And so last year, what cleared for me was this axis of doubt and confusion. And really this south node was in the gate of confusion. So it was like getting rid of needing perfectionism to come to an answer, to take action. It's a Virgo gate that can sometimes get so lost in perfectionism that it leads to a sense of confusion. And the eclipse was happening on that axis. And it was also in the gate of doubt, which is using mental faculties to doubt in order to reach a conclusion. And so the north node last year was in Pisces and the south node was in Virgo. And this year, the north node has just entered Aquarius and the south node in Leo. And so there has been an emphasis in both the Aquarius and Pisces north nodes of bringing emotional awareness and spiritual awareness to the forefront and letting go of the overly material, the overly tangible, the overly individualistic notions of Virgo and Leo, which are signs that are on the side of the chart that is based on the personal. Whereas the Pisces and Aquarius are on the transpersonal side of the chart. It's more about merging and connecting with the collective, not so much about shining as an individual being. So this eclipse was tight, almost exactly on my Venus. And thinking about the personal signs, Leo and Virgo being these south node areas of the chart that were eclipsed. The south node is like a drain, it's the tail of the dragon. And so it's kind of excreting or releasing the things that are not serving so we can create more space for the north node, the head of the dragon. And kind of that's always on this collective level. And the south and north node move through these axes, through these different signs every 18 months or so. And so as we've moved from Virgo to Leo, they're different, very different energies, Virgo and Leo, but they're also on the same side of the chart. They're on the bottom half of the chart. If you're looking at a natural chart that starts with Aries and moves around to Pisces in that order, then Leo and Virgo are on the bottom half of the chart, which is the personal part, whereas the upper half of the chart is the transpersonal. And so Leo and Virgo naturally rule the 5th and 6th houses in the chart. Aries rules the first, it's the individual, the sense of self, and then you move all the way around. And there's a natural rulership that correlates each sign to a house. And so Leo is the natural ruler of the 5th house, which is the house of children and self expression and creativity. And then Virgo is the natural ruler of the 6th house, which is the house of service and day to day work and routines and health, which are all things associated with Virgo generally. And this is not like a one-to-one correlation. The houses and signs are different. They have different ways of coming into being and different histories and philosophies. But there is an interesting correlation when you can trace the 12 signs and the 12 houses as far as what parts of life they're related to. So when we think about Leo and Virgo, these are harvest signs. Leo is like the fruit in the wheel of the year. If we're looking at the zodiac as the plant life cycle, Leo is the fruit, this tangible result that you can see and hold that is radiant in its individuality. And Virgo is the harvest maiden who is sorting ripe from rotten and deciding if the fruit is worth composting or if it's worth preserving and saving for the winter. And on the other side of the wheel from that, Pisces and Aquarius are more like the mycelium underground and the root network, this integration of a cycle that's already happened, the soil, the compost. And they're air and water signs, whereas Leo and Virgo are fire and earth. And so we have all the elements here within these four signs. But it's interesting to think about the North Node being in these signs of water and air recently, and the South Node, where we're releasing and draining and letting go of things, being in earth and fire. Pisces and Aquarius are all about interconnecting with the other, creating channels of interconnection, really. And it's interesting because the gate that was opposite this eclipse in Leo that just happened in human design was the gate of revolution. So the eclipse happened in the gate of formalization in Leo, but right across the sky from that was the gate of revolution, also known as the gate of principles. And the gate of principles is an emotional center gate, emotional solar plexus gate in the body graph that is all about leaning into the principles, the wisdom of our body and the principles that it delivers to us, and that bringing forth revolution by aligning with those principles rather than trying to logically from our heads formulate an answer, because sometimes we have to go beyond the mental and get back into the body, into the emotional wisdom in order to create something that's truly revolutionary, right? I just made a reel about how this Leo Aquarius axis is the axis of the fruit, Leo being the fruit, and then Aquarius being the roots and the mycelium that are underground. And that's where the gate of revolution is. And so I was kind of talking about how the revolution that I think a lot of us want to see is a very public, out on display, out in the tangible world type of on the street revolution. Especially, I think about the Pluto and Leo generation, which is the boomers who were out on the streets during the 60s, oftentimes are disappointed that isn't happening as much, or they don't see it as visibly in younger generations, even though, of course, that is still happening. But what's interesting to me when I think about revolution being in this part of the sky that's about interconnection and about the roots and the mycelium is noticing that those are parts of the plant life cycle that happen when there isn't really much above the surface. It's like they're winter signs in the northern hemisphere, and they're all about what is happening beneath the surface. It's this idea that the revolution is happening in the mycelial networks underground, in the communities, in the conversations that are happening that are not being televised and are not being projected. But oftentimes, because we're so focused on the fruits and the external, everything being out in the open, everybody speaking their truth on social media, our politicians being apparently out in the open. I think what we're learning with this axis is that we are hungry for something that's a little more underground, like the roots and the mycelium are. And so that's been a really interesting pondering that I've been thinking about as far as like, what are we hungry for as a collective with the North Node in Aquarius? And what are we releasing with this eclipse cycle starting with the South Node in Leo? And, that's often associated with release of the ego, release of being performative and having to be on stage. And there's a lot of beautiful content that's been circulating around that. And so it's a very potent time for Leo placements and also Aquarius placements, because we have Pluto in Aquarius right now for the next 20 years, at the same time as the North Node's there for the next 18 months. And so there's this hunger, but also this darkness that we're seeing as far as like, what are the underground things that are happening that are beneath the surface that we always thought were more on the surface within politics, within world affairs. There's a lot more happening beneath the surface in those interconnected networks than we ever knew. And it's all coming out. Pluto likes to excavate the basement and show what is down there in the depths. And so that's happening, right? There's been this big reveal on like the big collective level around the same time as America, United States, Pluto return, because Pluto takes 248 years, 250-ish years to orbit the sun. So we're going through this reckoning of America as a plutonic force at the same time as we're seeing what's happening in the underbelly of like the interconnected world of, you know, international crime, not bounded by nation state. It's the interconnection of Aquarius for better or for worse, right? And so right now with the North Node there, though, there's also this awareness and this hunger and this destiny point of seeing that, that's the way things do get done, is not always on the public stage. Sometimes it has to be underground. So that's how the personal became collective. It's just being on my Leo. I have rising Venus and Mars. And so a lot of personal planets and points in Leo. And so feeling like the South Node traveling through there is a little bit like, oh no, what do I have to release? What does that mean? There's shame around South Node stuff sometimes, I feel like, oh, it's time for everybody to be releasing this kind of performativeness and ego. But another take that I've seen on that is that we're releasing the falseness when it comes to being seen, and actually that allows us to step into just owning our true authenticity and how we shine, how we fruit into the world, how we create and self-express naturally without that layer of it being for consumption, right? It's productivity, fruiting, juiciness without needing to be seen. And so that's what's going on. I'm really curious. Let me know in the comments how this eclipse showed up for you on that Leo Aquarius axis. If you have any Leo placements or Aquarius placements, it would be interesting to know, and what gates they show up in. I am offering readings in this eclipse season if you need support. So just a little plug there. Hearth and Spiral is my website where you can access all the different types of readings that I do, from midlife transit readings to eclipse season readings to astrocartography readings. I've been really loving doing consulting client work lately and would love to talk to you about what you're currently experiencing. I'm also open for a couple more coaching clients right now to do a little bit more long-term work, looking into the larger seasons of your life. So just putting that out there. And since we're talking about the seasons, I do want to plug my third offering, which is a course that I'm offering starting on the fall equinox called Ecosomatic Astrology. And it's going to run from the fall equinox, September 22nd, until late October. It's going to be 6 weeks on Tuesday evenings. All classes are recorded, so you don't have to be there live in person, but you can be live on Zoom. And it's going to be a really somatic-based course where we're going to be doing a bit of theory and lecture, talking about the body and the ecology and the seasons and how they connect into the study of astrology, the zodiac, the planets, the aspects, all of the basics that you would need to know about astrology through an ecosomatic lens. And then it's going to include a lot of embodiment practices and ways to not only receive this information through the mind, but to integrate it in through the body and through being in the environment, the nature around us. So I'm really, really excited to be bringing this through. It's like the distillation of what I've been working on for almost a decade now. And so I'd love for you to join me. You can register at hearthandspiral.com. There's a big link on top for ecosomatic astrology. And then if you're listening to this and you're more of a human design person, I am also offering a human design class right after that. So it's ecosomatic human design, where I go into the ecology and embodiment of that mandala, that wheel, and the body graph. And so if you want to take both, I have a bundle where you can get both. And then if you get both, there's a discount for both, as well as a free one-on-one consultation with me to look into your specific charts, both astrology and human design, and how they relate ecology to the embodiment practices. So thank you for hearing and receiving my fruits, the brainchilds that are popping out here in Leo season. It feels really deeply personal to the way I see the world and what I'm bringing through. And I'm really excited to teach and to hold space for getting to know your body and the world around you in a way that is connected to these ancient techniques of astrology and the synthesis of human design. So, yeah, check it out. It is going to be so much fun. But moving on, because I had to fruit that all out, juice it out a little bit. But I'd like to talk a little bit about what else has happened for me during this eclipse as it ties into the larger collective. Basically, it ties into the elements and how all of the wheel is related in one way or another. Basically, there's this root versus fruiting, this kind of soil versus harvest opposition happening with the two sides of the wheel where the node are right now. It's a very winter summer axis. And that underground versus visible tension really showed up again for me when I felt into the exactness of my Uranus opposition yesterday, which happened in my fifth and 11th house. It's happening in my fifth and 11th house. And that's the same axis as Leo and Aquarius. So again, Leo rules the fifth house, and across the sky, Aquarius is the natural ruler of the 11th house. So although my Uranus is in Sagittarius and the opposite point transiting Uranus is in Gemini, it's on this fifth, 11th house axis. So it brought up themes of Leo and Aquarius again. My north node is in my 11th house, ruled by Aquarius, and my south node is in my fifth house, ruled by Leo. So there's this real thread connecting my natal Uranus to the transiting Uranus in the sky and this Leo Aquarius axis of the eclipse and the nodes right now. It's kind of was like doubling down on this fire versus air energy. And Leo is fire, Aquarius is air. And then the signs where my Uranus and transiting Uranus are opposing each other are Sagittarius and Gemini, which is another fire and air duality. So the oppositions in the wheel are always on that axis of duality. And fire and air have been such big themes lately in the world because all of the outer planets are in fire and air right now after many, many years being in earth and water. So we have Neptune in Aries, and we have Pluto in Aquarius, we have Uranus in Gemini, and then Jupiter for the next year is in Leo. And so it's fire and air all around with all of the outer planets. So that's really showing up on the collective level. And then also in my personal chart, my Uranus opposition was fire and air. And then this eclipse was fire and air. And so it really feels like this is where we're being asked to grow into in a big way. To get personal into how my Uranus opposition has shown up over the past 24 hours, there's been a really potent download that I've been receiving. And I feel like I'm going back in time through parts of my life where I've been called out or called into being more attuned to air. In high school, I had a friend who her sun gate and her sun sign was opposite my Uranus. So her sun gate is where Uranus is currently transiting. That's also my Chiron gate. So it's the gate of the wounded healer in Gemini. And she was someone who I was dear friends with since very early childhood. And then in high school, I felt very disconnected from her, but also like wanting to please her. I felt like she was somebody who was always really caught up in the tizzy of like everyone else's business, talking about the drama constantly. It felt petty to me, and it took a lot of effort not to judge it. But I was also simultaneously felt wounded by it and wanted to be more like that, more in the moment, more Gemini, more kind of flirtatious and flitting about from place to place in that kind of butterfly hummingbird type of air that is Gemini. So she had her sun there, and I have Uranus and Jupiter together right across the sky from that. I also have Neptune and my south node all in Sagittarius. So this big stellium of planets in Sagittarius, this fire sign that's all about big picture philosophy and connecting all the dots together, shooting your arrow towards the horizon, seeking new horizons. Yeah, philosophy, dogma, libraries, higher education, all of these things are associated with Sagittarius. And Sagittarius naturally doesn't like getting pulled into the present moment or the immediate, because the immediate can feel like not connected enough to the larger pattern because it's just one moment. And so the axis that my Uranus opposition has been happening on is the axis of the present moment, the now, the gate of the now in Gemini. That's where transiting Uranus is and will be for the next year. And so everybody's feeling this kind of liberation and disruption and activation in the gate of the now in Gemini. But my natal Uranus and Jupiter are both in the opposite gate from that in Sagittarius, which is gate 34, the gate of power. And in the human design body graph, if you're familiar with human design, the 3420 channel, not only are they opposition across the wheel, different energies across the mandala, but they're also creating a channel between the throat and the sacral center, which is what creates a manifesting generator in human design. There is a connection between the throat and the sacral, the power of the sacral center, gate 34, and the expression of that power in the present moment, in the now. And so I've always had gate 20 activated by my Chiron, but that doesn't show up in the body graph. It's just been this kind of hidden influence. And then I've had Jupiter and Uranus in my chart in gate 34. So I don't have that channel fully connected because Chiron is not a part of it. But there has been an awareness of it, this activation of like feeling the power of the big picture, of the synthesis, of the philosophies, of the travel, and feeling the beautiful strength that comes with that interconnection, that fieriness, but then not always having an outlet to be able to express it in the moment. And so feeling kind of disconnected from the present moment a little bit sometimes. And that really showed up with my friend whose sun gate was in the now. She was very much able to be in the now. And it really was one of those things that kind of just haunted me throughout my life. Like the things that she said to me. She's like, you can only go so far with people. She kind of just called me out and was like, you don't get deep enough with people. The way I naturally moved through the world was very different than her. And she wanted more from me. And I got really hurt by that. If I had had human design in high school, or if I had had this awareness, I would have just been able to see very clearly that like, oh, your sun is on my Chiron, and like, oh, like my power planets are just operating in a different frequency than yours. But again, on this axis, which right now, this week is where my Uranus opposition is happening. So super fascinating. That kind of came to me last night as I was processing this eclipse and this transit for myself. Really just attuning to that pain point that I had been so sensitive to, about like not being able to get close enough with people, not being able to flirt with life in the way that some other people have expected me to. But meanwhile, I'm flirting with life by like traveling and living in a bunch of different countries and creating interconnected ties between disparate things to form this full picture. Very Sagittarian, right? And so it's interesting that my North Node is also in Gemini. So I do, like, we're talking about the North Node representing the head of the dragon and hunger. And for me, that is so real that, like, not only is my Chiron there, but also my North Node is calling me. The asteroid Vesta is also there in Gemini for me with my North Node about what you're devoted to. And so I am called to the present moment. I am called to this more butterfly hummingbird type of energy, spreading what I know, spreading what I believe and think and feel to in the way that pollinators do, rather than collecting it all like the centaur archer into my tomes of books and then speaking it from the mountaintop or whatever. So again, it's fire and air, and it's very much like integrating these polarities. For a while, I was shaming my South Node in the way that I was talking about how we might be shaming the Leo South Node right now for like so much talk about like we gotta get rid of the ego. For a while, I was shaming my Sagittarius South Node where my Uranus and Jupiter are, saying like, oh, it's dogmatic, or like it's too this, it's too big picture, it's too disconnected. And being like, I want to be more like the Gemini energy on the other side. It's more chatty, more in the moment, more conversational, more local. And what I realized is that, like, no, they're two sides of the same coin. We need both. We need the Aquarius mycelium and we need the fruits of Leo. But ecologically, the way I see Sagittarius and Gemini is that Sagittarius is the mutable fire sign that is moving quickly with a lot of power and force and focus. And it's that type of fire in late fall, early winter when that season happens that controlled burns were traditionally done to break the soil down into carbon, into a healthier soil, and to break the seed casings open so that they could grow the next season. There's a very powerful use for fire in traditional societies, and it's not just a danger. And so Sagittarius for me is that wildfire energy. And on the other side of that, in late spring, Gemini season is the season of the pollinator, the breeze that blows pollen from one plant to another, or the butterfly that catches that breeze, or the bees or the hummingbirds. And so there's this elemental difference across the wheel again with fire and air. And that's what made me want to record this today, was just like fire and air has been on the minds of many when we're talking about this specificity of the larger moment that we're in with all of the outer planets in fire and air. And to me, it showed up very personally with more of my personal planets and South Node and familiarity in fire, in that strength and that formalization and that radiance. And then realizing that in multiple ways right now in my life, I'm being called to air, to pollination, to the breeze, and to the aeration of the soil, the channels of air that move through in Aquarius season that allow for a healthier soil to let deeper roots take hold so that plants can grow. So fire and air. What I found moving through this opposition is that fire and air have similar qualities. If you just like take a moment to close your eyes and imagine air moving and fire moving, they can be quite similar. Blustery and a fast moving fire, or a contained fire and air that's contained in a space. Like they both flow a lot and have a lot of potential movement. And they can both be still. There's ways in which they're very similar, but there's also a different quality to it. I do feel like air is associated in the tarot with like the mental, and fire is more heart-centered or more sacral, kind of more that center point of the body. And fire kind of burns through whatever it touches or clings to what it touches. And air is more absorbent of what is filling it, right? You think of the smoke filling into the air. There's a certain diffusion to air that fire doesn't have, and a certain ability to also absorb and transmute. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on fire and air as elements. But I feel like in the collective trajectory, as well as in my personal life right now, there's a little bit of movement from the comfort of fire towards the newness of air. And for me, I'm just personally finding real value in what air offers. Air keeps soil healthy through aeration, but you also need fire earlier in the cycle to break the plant matter down in the first place. And decomposition needs both of these stages, both that active burn, that sacral burn, and then the slower work of aeration that follows it. I think of air and the way it creeps into places. Fire is a little more forceful. And I think that integrating fire and air is the real lesson here for me and for the collective, because these two poles across the sky are always most potent together. And that really means kind of unshaming the fire side of my experience and noting that there's a certain pride and there's also a certain shame around fire for me, around fruit and putting things out into the world and a self-expressing coming very naturally to me as an artist, but also having a bit of shame in like, is that egotistical? Is that me just wanting attention? And then same thing with Sagittarius. It's like, am I too big pictured? Am I always trying to interconnect things? Or is that actually okay? I've worked with Britton LaRue, the astrologer, extensively, who's done a lot of work with unshaming the signs. And I think that it's important to notice when we start feeling shame around a certain sign or even a certain element or even a certain like life cycle of the plant, like part of the plant, it's just like, is the fruit better than the roots? No, is the fire that breaks down the seeds worse than the butterfly that pollinates? No, like they're all part of this same cycle and they're all needed in their own way. But we can get kind of an overemphasis on one, which is what the lunar nodes as they travel through the zodiac and what all of the planets are here to teach us is about how we can balance and focus on certain things at certain times, but not continuously overemphasize one as better than the other. It was interesting because I posted this reel on TikTok about the roots and the fruit, and somebody commented on it and was like, "Are you sure you want Aquarius to be the roots?" And I was like, "Well, it's not that what I want or don't want. It's just kind of the association that I see as true, but sure, like let's entertain this." And she was basically just like, well, I see Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, and Uranus is not the kind of stable root system that you want. And I was like, well, traditionally Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, which is about stability, right? It's a different than Capricorn Saturn, which is more of a still and focused stability. I've always seen Aquarius ruled by Saturn as like the type of stability that is stability through the network effect, through node-based architecture, rather than straight up and down architecture. But this person was just like, I said that back, like, well, what about Saturn as a stable root system? And they were like, oh, I actually see Saturn in the same way. Like, you don't want Saturn as the roots either. So I just thought that was funny because Leo is the sun. The sun to me is like very much the fruit, right? It's like visible all the time. It's out there. And then what's underground is this Saturnian Uranian thing. And I was like, you need Uranus energy, the electric kind of energy to break through the seed to start rooting in the first place. And you need that kind of liberatory Uranian energy to move through hard packed soil after the winter, right? And like make those roots and mycelial branches and filaments aerate the soil. It requires Uranian electricity and also Saturnian diligence, right? And discipline. So anyway, I digress. I just thought it was a funny way to be like, no, I'm interested in the ecology of this, and this is how I'm seeing it through these elements. And so unshaming, bringing together fire and air, thinking about fire and air not as two static elements, but actually how do they show up? Do they show up as a gentle breeze? Or do they show up as the atmosphere? Do they show up as aeration coming into the soil? Do they show up as a big gust of wind? Like Libra. Libra is the fall when you're changing from kind of summer into fall, the fall equinox. And Libra is another air sign that was also activated by Venus during this eclipse. Venus was at 5 degrees of Libra on the eclipse, and that was right on my moon. So it was another personal activation during this very potent day of August 12th. And so it was interesting because Libra was opposite Neptune, and Neptune is currently in Aries. So we have Venus in Libra opposite Neptune in Aries as this other opposition, bringing that third fire air opposition into the picture of this eclipse axis. And so Libra is again like that fall time when the leaves are blown off the trees by a big gust of wind around fall equinox. That's the type of air, the temperature's changing from hot to cold, and the big wind, the big air comes through, knocking the leaves off, knocking the rotten parts of the plant off, the dead parts, and allowing them to come into conversation to meet the ground and to meet the soil of the past cycles, the soil that's made up of all of the plant matter from cycles gone by. And so this thing that was just alive is meeting the transpersonal, the compost for the first time. So it's like the self meeting the other, and that's Libra. That's that balance point, the scales. So for me, the air of Libra, it's cardinal air, it's initiatory air, it's air that blows leaves off of trees. So we have that kind of air. We have the more gentle spring breeze of Gemini air. We have the myceliating channel air of Aquarius season that's like bringing the larger atmospheric air into the underworld. And so there's different types of air, right? And there's different types of fire. Like Aries is the spark, it's cardinal fire, opposite from cardinal air, Libra. And that's like this spark of a match. It's this catalyst. It's like the energy that it takes for the sprouts to pop up above the ground. It's just like boom, the ram's horns, that's Aries. So that's a different type of fire than Leo's fire, which is like a hearth. It's like this containment of fire, the way fruit contains its juices. And then there's Sagittarius, which is like this wildfire that is breaking things down and changing the environment. And that's mutable fire. So we have, like within this eclipse, we had all the fire and air coming together and meeting each other. And it was just super fascinating to lean into that and to think about how fire and air really play off of each other and help each other. And the fire and air signs are all a sextile, a harmonious sextile apart from each other. And so they're creating this grand sextile in the sky right now, which is a grand fire trine and a grand air trine. I've been talking a lot about this grand sextile, six-pointed star. And to me, it's like it's an integration of fire and air is really what's being asked of us right now. So with my moon in Libra, with Venus transiting it, this other air sign, during this eclipse, I feel like to really wrap this up, what that brought to me is that axis is about finding value in embodiment, like with Libra being that gust of wind that pulls the dead leaves down to meet the ground and closing the loop between what's already lived and what's still growing. Having Venus there collectively right now, it's transiting through Libra, and Venus loves to be in Libra because Venus is about relationality and Libra is about relationality. But that's relationality between the above ground, the above world, and the underworld, in the way that it's not just relationship between people, but it's like up above and down below. And Venus was, in ancient texts, Venus was represented by Inanna, who is the goddess of the great above and the great below, the sky and the earth. And so this is this meeting point, and Venus is right there in the early degrees of Libra right now, reminding us of like the unity between this axis. So it's not like a battle between fire and air and being like which one's better, but I think Venus as an archetype actually really reminds us the sky and the earth, right? The great above, the great below, the sacral and the throat, the fuel and the dispersion, all of these the types of things that are coming together. So collectively right now, this is a potent time. We're in this eclipse portal, but we're really being asked to look at the relationship between life and death, between fire and air, between what's visible on the surface and what's working underneath it. And Neptune in Aries is this 14-year transit through this sign of the spark, the initiating cardinal fire sign that is really holding promise of a new personal initiation, spiritual sovereignty, spiritual warriorship that is available for us if we also let go and release this philosophy that things are binary, that's this is better, that's better, but actually really integrating these dichotomies, releasing that shame so that we can come into our own personal agency and releasing our over attachment to finding out the formulaic truth. That's what happened in this eclipse, was like there's not like a logical formula, but there's a felt sense of, okay, we just have to be in the great above and the great below. We have to know that it is a cycle and that all of these parts of the cycle, the butterflies flapping wings and pollination, and the Sagittarius wildfire, and the Leo fruit, all of this is so incredibly important. And we haven't even talked about earth and water signs in this, focusing on fire and air here, but even within just these two polar opposite elements, there's so much that is coming through about the importance of divine union between seeming opposites, right? Because when you look at it from an ecological viewpoint, it's like it's silly to put shame or blame onto one sign versus another. So, anyway, for this whole collective, I feel like for me with my Uranus opposition and for the collective, this whole cycle is all about integrating the self and the other and making sure that we can use the qualities of air, of pollination and aeration, and the gusts that carry life into contact with death and keep the whole cycle turning. That this integration, this figure eight, is where the real movement is happening, even before we can see it. And so I'll leave you with that today because I've got to go pick up my kid from art camp. um, and move on with my day. But thank you for being here and being a part of this project and this journey. I really am looking forward to just putting more fruits out there during this fruiting season. And again, just so happy to consult one on one, whether it's a short term reading or a long term coaching container. It's just been such a joy to be in those practices lately. And for anyone who's part of those containers or has had readings with me in the past and is listening today, just a deepest heartfelt thank you to you for showing up and trusting me with your personal cycles and evolution that you're going through. It's been really amazing to learn from you, and I am excited to offer the course that is going to be an experiential, very embodied course. So if you're feeling like you can't take any more information in right now, I feel you, but it's going to be less about the information and more about these thematic principles surrounding the elements, surrounding our connection to Mother Nature, and how our bodies are really a part of this earth and her cycles as well. So please visit hearthandspiral.com to sign up for that. I'll put a link in the show notes as well. And let me know how this eclipse portal is feeling for you, how the fire and air dynamic is showing up in your world. And I'll see you next time on Living the Spiral.